If you're over 40, juggling a demanding job, family commitments, and trying to stay fit, this episode is for you. Maybe you've been lifting for years but struggle to get your nutrition right, or perhaps you've lost touch with your physicality with all of life's responsibilities. You're eager to reclaim your health, to lose fat, to feel strong again, but the challenges seem overwhelming. In today's episode, we are talking to someone just like you who managed to lose 36 pounds of body fat and 5 inches off his waist despite a busy lifestyle and without losing his hard-earned muscle or strength. Today, I have longtime client Jerry Bonanno on the show. Like I mentioned in the intro, Jerry used the Wits and Weights approach of working smarter and more efficiently to shed 36 pounds of fat and 5 inches off his waist in his 50s without losing his muscle, size, or strength. We'll explore how he balanced a demanding job, family commitments, and community responsibilities while making significant strides in his physical health. In this episode, we'll discuss how he did it and what you can do to replicate his results. Jerry, I'm super excited to have you on the show.
Great to be here. Thanks. Appreciate it.
So let's set the scene here, right? You train, your handle on Instagram is at the Basement Ape, right? Basement Ape.
Yeah.
And you're about to start your next training session. I want you to take us there into that dark, dank basement gym of yours. What is running through your mind as you prepare to lift? What emotions are bubbling up? Walk us through the sights, the sounds of training as Jerry, from that electric anticipation before you grab the bar to the raw intensity of each rep. Paint us a picture of Jerry's world.
Well, I wish I could. I wish I could fill all that in. But I train like a lot of people who are trying to juggle a lot of different things. I train pretty much first thing in the morning. So I'll take you from the point where my alarm goes off, which is usually around 4:30 a.m. And the first thought that comes to mind is not any of that. It's go back to sleep.
Good one.
Yeah. So typically, literally, that's the first thought that goes through my head. Like everybody, kind of struggle to get enough sleep. So I'm usually working on six and a half hours of sleep a night. I catch up sometimes on the weekends, but typically then just convince myself to get out of bed. Usually that only takes a few minutes, which is good. And then honestly, these days, I'm not really commuting every day. I'm working from home most days, which is great because I can eat before I train. So usually go down and get something to eat and pretty much the same thing every day. And it's a combination of some carbs and about 40 grams of protein. And usually then can let that settle for about 20 minutes. So I have that luxury. And then I'll go down into the basement. And, right now, I'm training on a 6-day-a-week kind of body part split, one of Andy Baker's bodybuilding templates. So usually there's one big lift involved there or a heavier kind of barbell oriented lift or something that I'm really pushing hard to progress on. And then after that, there'll be some more kind of like bodybuilding movements that'll, usually higher rep things that I can move a little bit faster on. So typically when I first start, as far as warming up, I use the movement that I'm going to do to warm up. I don't do any really special warm up. Usually something hurts, whether it's, to a mild to moderate degree. I'd say about a third of the time it's my mid back, a third of the time it's my left shoulder, and a third of the time I'm pretty much pain free. So that's the reality of it, when you get up to the ripe old age of 50, I guess. So then I'll usually, like I said, I'll start with warm ups on that big movement and then move through that. That usually takes the longest. And then I can really get the session going from there and usually get done in about an hour, maybe some 45 minutes to 75 minutes if I'm really kind of moving a little bit slow that day or there's a lot of stuff to move around in the basement. I can do most things down there. I have a power rack, barbell, a couple specialty bars.
Machine press. You've got a machine press that I'd love to get.
Recently picked that up. That was my one of my favorite recent pickups.
Yeah.
The Titan shoulder press and, lateral raise machine that I got pretty used, but it was pretty much right out of the box. And I look for stuff with a small footprint. I don't have a tremendous amount of space. So I have a lat tower and a shoulder press machine, like you mentioned. And I have a bench rack. It's the Titan rip off of the West Side bench rack, which works just fine for me. And, that's probably frivolous. I could probably bench in my squat rack, but I like having that set up and, I can just jump on it when I'm done and have an adjustable bench and a couple heavy dumbbells for rowing and stuff like that. And that's about it. I think I have a 45 degree back raise too. So not a crazy home gym, but
yeah. Yeah, man. So it's funny because I gave you this really dramatic setup, and then the answer is, you know what? I'm a disciplined guy. I have a routine. I have the same kind of temptation and friction as everyone else. First, when you get up in the morning, I just want to hit that snooze. But it's like you just do this, and I actually love that answer because people listening, they're always looking for some big secret or some big motivation, and really it isn't that. It's like the bread and butter basics of just you got to get into this routine and do it right.
I think it's funny because, like, especially after I lost the weight with you, lost the body fat with you, really changed the way I live. It's always big and stronger or whatever, but now shedding that body fat really has kind of, I think, improved the way I look. So now, especially people are like, well, what do you do? What do you do? And it's like, I did the same thing I did 15 years ago, essentially, outside of nutrition, which is just get up and it's like, it's always the first step and it's always the same first step, and then you just keep going from there. So, there's no secret, but I will say, once you develop that discipline and you start seeing results, the motivation does build. You start stepping into that identity a little bit instead of chasing it. So you're, it gets better as you go along, especially when you taste a little bit of success. So
you step into the identity rather than chase it. That's gold, man. Like that really is like, because we do talk about having this future identity and people are like, well, yeah, that's great. But I have this huge gut or I'm not very strong or whatever. And it's like, you just have to start and take those steps. And it doesn't have to be hard. We're going to talk about some of the steps in here where even Jerry, after all those years of, lifting and knowing how to do that, the nutrition, there were still some gaps, maybe some knowledge gaps and process gaps that had to be filled in, which no shame in that, right? We all got to learn some of that somewhere and then apply it. You mentioned when you work out, you warm up, with your lift, you have a big lift, some accessories, and usually something hurts. I think that's an important thing to talk about for a second for us older guys, women and men. And you've said left shoulder, it's the same shoulder for me because that's where I have my surgery, but mid back, low back fatigue, mid back fatigue, shoulder, sometimes you're pain free. Does it stop you in any way or how do you work with that?
no, I mean, pain's kind of one of those things that's, you have to kind of, it's a little bit individual. I mean, I know I'm not injured, I know myself by now, right? So you have to be careful. I mean, you shouldn't be in agonizing pain doing anything. You need to kind of stop and reevaluate if that's the case. But, for me, it's like my back hurts mostly because I've slept on my stomach, since I was 8 or 9 years old, and I'm trying to break myself of that habit, but it's pretty hard. So I don't think that's been great for my back. And then a couple years ago, I had a hernia repaired really electively. It wasn't a problem. And I came back a little too fast from that and actually tweaked my back for the first time ever. I never had back issues. And so that lingers a little bit, but that, and I think shoulders is just trying to push my bench up over 400 pounds a couple years ago and benching a week and a lot of flat benching. Did kind of tighten my shoulders up a little bit. So got some of that mobility back by, changing my training up a little bit and things like that. So yeah, I think aches and pains are not necessarily injuries, right? So I think you learn how to figure yourself out as you go. But I think you should anticipate at least a little bit of this kind of hurts, this thing that we do sometimes.
Yeah.
So
it's uncomfortable. Yeah.
Yeah, you shouldn't I guess there's a distinction. You shouldn't really be, if a joint really hurts or something is amiss, you should, definitely honor that. But you're going to feel it from time to time. And sometimes you just need to take it slow and train through it. And hopefully it's nothing. And usually by the, after the warm ups, the pain is pretty much gone, so.
Yeah. I think that's important. It's something I think about a lot too. And I recently posted something about pain and bad form, and somebody chimed in and said, well, it's not really the bad form. It's just something that you're unprepared for. You haven't trained for whatever it is. And that's why you don't want to just jump into things and not warm up. But also if you know yourself, like this morning I did shoulder press, dumbbell shoulder presses, the second week in a row after several months of not doing them because of my shoulder. And it's painful when I start warming up, but it's a pain that I know will warm into it, go away, and then I'll be able to respond. And guess what will happen? The next day I'll actually feel a lot better. And you kind of have to learn that about your body, right? That it's, you balance it and don't use it as an excuse, but you've also got to be smart about it.
Yeah, you should definitely pay attention to it. Don't ignore it. Note that it's there. And then, like I said, just take it slow, warm up. You mentioned the shoulder press machine. That machine's been great for me. I think it's really, made a difference in my shoulder training, but every time I sit down on it, the first two warm-up sets, it's like, man, my shoulders are kind of feeling it. By the time I get to the third or fourth set, the pain's gone.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty good to go. So it's sometimes, like you said, it's just warming up. It's just getting through that initial kind of body's just saying, oh, okay, this is what you want me to do. And you're kind of limbering up and not being so tight. I think sometimes there's a reflex when you get into a position that's a little stretched and you tighten up and it causes a little bit of discomfort or pain. So yeah, pain's tricky, but I think there's going to be some level of discomfort if you're going to lift, especially over the long term. So
yeah, cool, Matt. So what I want to do now is kind of like they do in the movies or in a good TV show, that we'll talk a little bit about the recent before after, or the recent before when we started working together. And then we're going to do like the flashback, like 10 years ago, or 20 or 30 years ago, and kind of work back, because I want to tie these concepts together. So kind of the status quo here of where were you before we started working together, like around that moment, why you reached out, your physical, your mental state, and you're like, okay, I got to do something different.
Okay, yeah. So we started working together. It was almost just a little over a year ago. I think July 1st last year, we started our first 3-month cut. And I think where I was then is I was pretty big and strong, but I was too heavy. I mean, and I had known that for a while. I was hovering around like 250, and I'm only 5'9", so it's a lot of weight to be hauling around. I didn't have a lot of subcutaneous kind of jiggly fat, but I had a pretty good power belly going. I just, when I was approaching 50, I always told myself, like, I was pushing my strength, had competed for a little while, in local powerlifting meets and things like that. So, but I always told myself, you're really too heavy, to be heading into your 50s. There's no reason for you to be this heavy. And as that birthday approached, that was in December, I had tried a few times on my own, had some temporary success, but really never got my arms around nutrition the way I did when I started working with you. And then, we were both in the same kind of lifting club. So saw you in there, knew that you lifted, knew you're not quite as old as me, but you do have some gray hair. So I said, well, this guy's, he seems to have a relatively kind of demanding and normal life, and he's lifting and doing this stuff. And so I said, well, I think he'd be a good person to work with. And some other folks in the group had worked with you. So I really mentally, I was in a position where I don't like when I know I have to do something and I can't get it done. It bothers me. Mm-hmm. So this is something that I knew for a while, like, you need to get your arms around this and get it under control. Because frankly, my blood work at that time, I was kind of, if there's the 4 or 5 indicators for metabolic syndrome, I had been told a couple of times, like, I wouldn't quite diagnose you with metabolic syndrome, and that's only because you have so much muscle going on. But if that starts to tank, like, you're going to be in that space real quick. So I have kids that are relatively young, one in high school and one going into middle school. So I thought, I got some more life to do here, and I'd like to do it in a way that doesn't have me, in a really unhealthy place. So that's where I was before we started.
Yeah. And there's a lot of personal values in there, which are important. We talk about people's, why and why they do things. And that's super deep for you. So it kind of makes it, I'll say, easy to make that decision in a way. First of all, thanks for telling me that my gray hair actually served me well.
It did.
It's kind of funny because once it started graying, I'm like, I actually look older. Because I used to be up till the age of like 30, 35, like look like a 20-year-old. So, I keep the 6 o'clock shadow. But yeah, you said you had some temporary success in the past. I do want to talk about that, but your blood work was maybe getting a little worse. However, you had a lot of muscle. I use guys like you and you in particular as a good case study for folks as to why muscle-centric health is important. And we shouldn't just focus on weight loss, because the effort you put in all those years to build muscle is really helping you as a buffer, as a massive buffer. I mean, a huge buffer against the health issues where you could carry a lot of excess weight according to BMI standards and still be in that normal range. So, but not where you want to be ultimately. So that makes sense. Okay. You were doing carnivore before we met, right? Or it's one of the things you've done? Yeah.
I did a stint on carnivore. That was probably the last thing I really tried before we got together. And yeah, I just, I have a history of type 2 diabetes in my family. And so, I thought, well, I'm probably not great on all these carbs and the processed food that I'm eating. And so I was looking around for something that was pretty straightforward, even though it was very restrictive. I mean, that's kind of the two sides of something like carnivore. It's very restrictive, but it's not that complicated to implement because you can only eat a couple things, So that, I'll give it its due. I lost 13 or 14 pounds on it and then leveled out because I really wasn't tracking my calories or anything like that. I cut out a bunch of stuff. So, but, it was very hard to sustain, finding steak and eggs, and other stuff constantly to eat while you're trying to work or you're at a meeting or you're here or you're there, or you're traveling can get challenging. And so, I just stopped doing it because I couldn't sustain it. And then, that a little time passed. And then after that, I came to you. But, I know, for people that have specific maybe conditions that works. But for me, it worked. I couldn't tell why it worked because there were so many variables that were adjusted at the same time, but it wasn't a long-term solution. And frankly, I feel just as good now eating a good balance of macros than as I did then, probably better. So,
yeah, more carbs. And like you said, yeah, when you're traveling or just anywhere you have to rely on someone else for food, man, just trying to find protein alone, let alone just a pure like carnivore style diet is going to be, it's expensive food. It usually has to be cooked, so instead they put out the sandwiches and they put out the croissants and all that good stuff, right?
Right.
So it was simple but restrictive, which we hear constantly when it comes to these diets, and I've been there myself with keto and Atkins back in the day and everything, where it's like, simple list of foods, just eat this, don't eat that. And you're like, in the real world, no, it doesn't work.
Right.
So that's one of the obstacles. It wasn't sustainable. Is there anything else that comes to mind before we worked that, later on you gained some insight into?
I mean, me personally, it did. I think the other thing it did that, that helped was I wasn't eating anything processed. Right. And so that was another helpful, attribute of that. I think mostly it was just that it wasn't something I was going to be able to do for the long term. And, it wasn't, there's other foods you want to eat, that are just, that are eliminated. I'm not I always joke that I grew up with some really good cooks. And so I'm kind of over it. I'll never get food that good again, as like my grandmother or my uncles cooked or my mom and dad, so, but my wife's a great cook. I should take that back. She cooks really well, but yeah, it's just that I'm not super attached to specific foods, but there's really not a lot of variety there. So it just wasn't something I was going to be able to do, for the rest of my life. And I just came to that realization after 4 or 5 months,
Yeah. Now there's a concept that you've talked about, physicality. And I want to get into that because I want to tie that into why, besides health, right? Why you want to lose fat and how it connects to your training. Because you're a lifter. We want people to lift. We want people to get strong. And a lot of people may not have the history you do of doing it all those years, but regardless, it's an important thing. If you permit me, I'm going to read something that you wrote to me.
Sure.
And I'm going to try to do it in like a dramatic documentary voice, if that works. And then we'll see if we could throw some music behind it. So just came up with this. Let me give it a shot. All right.
Yeah.
Like a lot of men of his vintage, Jerry Bonanno started training for sports in high school, growing up on a steady stream of Arnold action movies in the 80s. Jerry played football and wrestling, training hard from age 13 to 23, but then he lost touch with his physicality, focusing on work, graduate school, law school, starting a family, and getting his career off the ground. He found himself in his early 30s, having accomplished a lot in those areas, but in a less optimal place physically. Despite being extremely busy, he started taking steps in earnest to get back in touch with his physicality. He rekindled his love of lifting and has been training consistently and hard for the past 15 years. Jerry's a big believer in men being unreasonable about prioritizing their physicality as they hit middle age and continuing to train hard into their 40s, 50s, and beyond. Sometimes you just need to be, in Jerry's own words, too stupid to quit. All right, so maybe it wasn't as dramatic, but with the music it might be. We'll see. I have to ask, how stupid to quit are you? And how unreasonably do you now prioritize your physicality? What does that mean?
Okay. Well, yeah. So as far as the physicality thing goes, I think that I'll get a little metaphysical here. But look, no matter what your faith system is or what you believe or don't believe, like our experience here on Earth is we live it in our physical bodies. There's no escaping that, right? So, this is what you have while you're here. And all of your experiences are going to be filtered through this kind of physical, shell that you inhabit. So, to me, if you don't pay attention to that, your experience here is not going to be what it should be. And so, that's kind of on the deepest level. But I mean, everybody wants their clothes to fit and to look the way they want to look. And I did grow up on a steady stream of Arnold movies and, Carl Weathers and, Lou Ferrigno and Sylvester Stallone and all that stuff. So, as a little kid, you're looking at that and saying, whoa, that's pretty awesome. Like, I could do that. I could handle that. And then,
what's your favorite of those movies?
I like Commando, but
okay.
I promised I'd kill you last and all that stuff. I lied, that whole thing. But anyways, so that is kind of the physicality part. And a lot of times, when you're running around trying to get from point A to point B, especially over a period of years, which is what happened to me from my mid 20s to like my mid 30s, you lose track of that. And I had started when I was young with that. It was really important in kind of my formation, a lot of these really physical kind of experiences, like you mentioned with sports and things. And then that all went away. And I covered a lot of ground in other areas, but like you said, just had lost kind of that piece. So I think struggled to get back into it. I mean, I went in a few different directions and then came back to lifting for the reason that I think it attracted me first, which is that it was really one of those things where it's like, you think there's something wrong with you or you're not who you think you should be. Mm-hmm. And you can actually fix it almost exclusively on your own. You don't have to show up at a class at a certain time. You don't have to deal with an instructor. You don't have to do any of that if you don't want to. You could do this. It's basically up to you. And being kind of a naturally, introverted, shyer type person, that was awesome. It's like, okay, so there's something not right about me and I can actually fix it. I can do that. And so that was encouraging. Some people get discouraged by that. If they're the solution and maybe part of the problem, I find that super encouraging. It's harder to change other people than it is to change yourself. So, but in order to do that, as the demands kind of pile up, you have to be what I say is like, you have to be unreasonable about it. And I can give you kind of an example with me when, pre-COVID, I had a very long commute in and out of work, pretty demanding job, like young family, all that kind of stuff. And it was a lot of commuting. I mean, no BS. It was close to 4 hours a day commuting. So it's like, okay, I want to build lifting back into my life. So how am I going to do that? So basically I had to get up at 4:15 every day for about 11 years and went to the gym then, and then borrowed all my stuff, got ready and went to work and, tried to do that 4 days a week or 3 days during the week and then lift on the weekend, a day on the weekend. And at various points in there, of course, you're going to start thinking, what am I doing? I'm getting up. I can't get enough sleep. I'm getting up. I'm getting home and I have to like pack up for the next day and I'm trying to eat and, talk to my wife and spend some time with my kids. And then I got to throw my clothes together and get in bed and get back up. So that's what I mean with being unreasonable. There's plenty of reasons not to do it. I mean, today, even, you wake up and you don't want to get out of bed, you're tired and so you have to be unreasonable with yourself and get yourself to do it. Don't give yourself, an out. I think you just have to always understand there's always 3 good reasons not to do what you should do, what you should be doing, but you have to do it anyway.
Yeah, you have to do it anyway. I mean, it sounds like it's so connected to your purpose and who you are. And it would be awesome if everybody listening could find that, and everybody can. I'm not saying they can't. And it's, even if somebody's listening like, but I like group classes or I want to do it, whatever you just said, like you're going to give yourself reasons not to do it. And I've heard that too with new clients when I'm trying to get them like training with barbells or whatnot. And like, but I really love the group class. And the question you have to ask yourself is, what do you really want out of all this? And is that going to get you there? You can definitely do things in your life that you enjoy that maybe don't serve that purpose, but you have to make the space and prioritize is what you're talking about, is prioritizing, but like not even giving yourself the reasons. They may exist, but so what? You do it. I mean, that's cool, man.
And that's just to add to that. That's why the early morning thing, because, I'm just like
do it first.
Else.
Yeah.
You get stuff pops up that you didn't know was going to be there. And no matter how carefully you plan, you're going to get your time gets sucked up by other things. So
it does.
Your first thing, like nobody else is even awake. So nobody can get in the way, so, but you have, it's not the most reasonable thing all the time, but you have to go there sometimes to get it done. So
I hear you, man. I used to say I'm not a morning person, and I know a lot of people listening probably nod their head like, yeah, I'm not a morning person. I can't do that. But again, I want you to keep this being reasonable in your head and just say, well, what if I did do it? What if I did it for like 3 weeks or 4 weeks, 3 or 4 days a week? I just did it and experiment with it and see how it makes you feel. I guarantee you're going to get the day started. You're going to be pumped. You're going to have the energy. You're going to I accomplished something huge already. And the most important thing for me right now for my physicality. And so the rest of the day is easy.
Yep. And it's, and it's going to, I'll just be frank. It sucks. I mean, it's going to suck.
It's going to be hard.
When I first transitioned to doing that, because I was lifting after work before my first daughter was born, it was horrible. I mean, I was like, this is the worst. Like, I can't do what I was doing after work. I can't, I'm really, I'm not awake yet. All these excuses, right? And they're real. I mean, but it's like, okay, you're going to acclimate to it. And now I can't train at night. I'm weaker at night, so you'll get used to it, and if it's that or nothing, then do it in the morning.
Exactly. Do it. How did you at some point make a decision elsewhere to make a trade-off so that it wasn't so hard, or like you didn't have that long commute, or did it just naturally your job changed?
That happened through COVID.
Yeah. Okay.
We started all teleworking and it kind of stuck. So, for me, that really changed my life, frankly, quite a bit. It helped me to really be able to get a little more rest and I think help with my consistency.
Yeah.
But I stuck to the mornings.
Sure.
And I kind of built out the home gym as my kids came into the picture.
Mm-hmm.
So I did go to I had the luxury of training at a really good powerlifting gym that was just outside of DC where I work, and some great people there, Matt Gary and Susie Hartwood Gary, who were from Maryland, awesome in the powerlifting world, and they taught me how to lift. So I got lucky. I had them there, but even when I was doing that, I would stop there on the way out of DC and then come home, and I wouldn't get home until 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night. So once my kids came into the picture, I think my wife had been really good about it, but at that point, it's like, okay, I got to be around after work. So switch to the morning.
Yeah. So you switched. There are deliberate things that you did, right? Like you switched to the morning, you built out your home gym, you did things to reduce friction, even when there was reasons to have a lot of friction, you kind of moved it around. And that's the important message. It's like, you can't always eliminate everything. That's stoicism right there. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like, this thing, like being reasonable, it's good. It's a good maxim, but don't grind yourself into a nub for no reason. I mean, be smart too. Like if there's things you can do to reduce the friction, do it. And the other thing is that I just want to mention with that, sounds inconsistent, but like you have to give yourself some grace once in a while. If you're on a 4-day program and you only hit 3 days that week, or a 5-day and you only hit whatever, don't quit. Don't drive yourself into the ground with that. Just keep going and move past it. It's going to happen. It happens.
It's going to happen. So a couple of times already, you've mentioned, working hard and smart at the same time. So shout out to our friend, Tony Perry, who's in the Andy Baker's Barbell Club with us. And he was on the show before. And he and I chat all the time, very philosophical guy. And he gives me some business advice as well. And I was talking about this podcast and updating the description, which I did. So for those watching, read the new description. It says something about working smarter and more efficiently. But my original draft was working smarter, not harder. And, that's kind of a cliche, trite thing that people say. And he's like, what are you talking about, man? He's like, no, you still want to work hard. You just do it. You combine it with smart, and that's how you get everything. That's how you work efficiently. And so you're hitting on those themes of like, there's effort and it's hard. And anybody listen to the show that wants it to be easy or fast or quick in any way, not going to happen. Not going to happen. You're going to have to go after it, but you could do it in a smart way. And what I don't want you doing is working hard and not getting the result. Cause that's the discouraging thing. When you're not doing it intelligent and you're working hard and you're like, well, I'm working hard, but it's not working. Okay. We're trying to teach you that here on this show. And Jerry's been there.
Yeah.
What about the food side along this whole, again, now we're going back in time. You say physicality was super important. Was nutrition or food like on par with your training in terms of the focus?
No.
Okay.
That's one thing that I've kind of come full circle on now, being where I am. It wasn't. And although I probably, looking back, I mean, I was lifting, I understood that I needed to eat relatively well. I needed to get enough protein, this, that, and the other thing. And I thought I was kind of doing that, before, but I'll say a couple of things in kind of reflecting when I started working with you, so what I was doing is just kind of eating free grazing, but trying to pick up enough protein to I thought be useful.
Mm-hmm.
But looking back, I really wasn't keeping track of anything. So I had no idea really how much of anything I was eating. Right. And so again, it's pretty simple stuff. But when I started working with you, I mean, I would say, looking back, a few things. If you're not tracking what you're eating, you have no idea how many calories you're eating. I don't care if you think you do or not. You're eating more calories than you think you are. That's super hard to judge, even if you're kind of paying attention. And you have no idea how little protein you're eating if you're not tracking, because it's not easy to get a gram per pound body weight of protein,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or 0.8 or whatever you're trying to do. And like me personally, when we started working together, I thought I was eating a lot of protein because, I'm lifting and I'm doing all the things. But I was probably lucky if I was eating 140 grams of protein a day and I was 250 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not even close. Like now, I'm getting a gram per pound pretty much every day just because of the way I eat, not even really going out of my way the way I eat today. So those were really the two things. So I was kind of like aware of nutrition and what I should be doing. But when I compare it to what I was doing with lifting and training, it's like I would never go lift and not write down what I did. Like ever.
Yeah, I know. Or it's like your budget, your training, all these other things you track.
Yeah.
And why don't we do that with our food? Yeah.
But for some reason with nutrition, I was like, I'm kind of doing it.
My name is Tony. I'm a strength lifter in my 40s. Thank you to Phil and his Wits and Weights community for helping me learn more about nutrition and how to implement better ideas into my strength training. Phil has a very, very good understanding of macros and chemical compounds and hormones and all that. And he's continuously learning. That's what I like about Phil. He's got a great sense of humor. He's very relaxed, very easy to talk to. One of the greatest things about Phil, in my view, is that he practices what he preaches. He also works out with barbells. He trains heavy, not as heavy as me, but he trains heavy. So if you talk with him about getting in better shape, eating better, he's probably going to give you some good advice. And I would strongly recommend you talk with him and he'll help you out.
That's a good segue into the things that you did change in your approach and kind of strategically, tactically. I mean, that was a huge one. That's step one. When I work with a client in our physique university, it's like the onboarding, the second module is tracking. And if you're like, oh, I don't want to track, I mean, so have you had an experience of tracking food ever in the past where at all? And then if you did, was it ever unpleasant, or was this the first time you really started tracking?
I had tried to track a couple times in the past and been going way back, I think in my mid 30s. I had some success with it, but I was just tracking what I was eating. I didn't really have a plan, or even with macros, I wasn't really paying attention. I was more just focused on calories, And so I had done it in the past, but I think having like, okay, I'm going to get into a calorie deficit. I'm going to keep my protein high enough to maintain or try to maintain the muscle I have during this cut. And I'm going to do it for just a period of time. It's not like I'm just in a deficit forever. It's like, we're going to run this deficit for the way we set it up, I think. And this was more like, just how I think. It's like, I'm going to run this deficit for a specific period of time. And there's a rate that I should be losing at, but I'm just going to focus on like the leading indicators, like doing the things. And where I end up is where I end up at the end of 3 months. And it's going to be dictated by how, closely I can stick to the plan, and probably a million other things that happen in your body when you're trying to do this. But I think those were the things that really changed, was having a plan, having an end date, and like saying, okay, let's do this and let's stay on track. And I think the tools that you have, and you're really good at data analysis, and so, I show up for a coaching call and say, I think this is happening. And, you say, well, you have the data, like I have it right here. Let's look. And it's like, yeah, that's happening or not quite, or here's why it's happening or whatever. So I think all of that is really what changed. And interestingly, like that stuck. I think we did 2 3-month cuts together, and that's all stuck. I've gotten on a scale pretty much every day. We can talk about that too. I know that's another bugaboo for some people, but I'm a big believer in weighing yourself every day, and then tracking food and tracking macros now. And if that's all you want to do, I think you can probably get most of the way where you want to be just doing that stuff. But
yeah, that's a great message, right? Like, so we talk about it on the show all the time. And I'm like, if you just listen to all the episodes and apply it, you'll be successful. Knowing that, however, there are specifics to you that you may not quite understand even when you have that, which is why I want to ask the next question, but then I want to dig back into what some of the details is. Why did you come back to me a second time? It happens more than people would think, where it's like, I want you to fire me when we're done, but then there's always things you can learn and help that you can get to make the process easier. So I'm just curious about that.
I think for me, we had a lot of success the first run, and there might have, I mean, this is not the only reason. I think the service was really good, all of that stuff. I mean, it worked. We clicked, it was fun working with you. There was nothing forced. It was like, how do you want this to go? How much help do you need? Where do you need the help? So it was very much customized to me, which was great. But also there was a little tinge of fear or anxiety that, like, I don't want to just have done that and then try this on my own and flop. So I wanted to make sure, like, I had it. And it's really interesting because virtually the same thing happened in the second cut as happened in the first cut. Mm-hmm. We got a little over 15 pounds of scale weight off, or weight trend off, however we tracked it. And, overall, over both cuts, I mean, my waist shrunk 5 inches. So I always kid you, and you kind of owe me a new wardrobe. But yeah. That's a good complaint to have. But no, that's why I really wanted to do a second run with you and just make sure I had everything down and could replicate those results.
Yes, it's interesting because I find that the most successful people that do this are the ones who are also willing. They're curious, first of all. Like, you asked a lot of great questions as we worked together and took advantage of whatever we could, and even got, challenged me on a number of occasions to really do my research and know my stuff. But the most successful people will have that curiosity and will seek help and will look for every tool available to, like, accelerate that process as much as possible, so that, eventually you can just do it on your own with complete confidence. Whereas the people that aren't as successful, it's like, I could do it on my own. They kind of refuse to reach out for help. And I'm not saying you have to pay for a coach. I get it. Not everyone can afford that, but, like, just rely on other people for, like, I found that time and again with every aspect of life. Even if you are training by yourself in your dank basement gym, you learned from a lot of greats that came before you. And I'm sure you learned from a lot of people who are your peers. So, tell us about, like, as we work together, you were asking great questions and trying to learn. I feel like you were trying to get your own education in nutrition above and beyond just tell me what steps to take, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So, I mean, for me, it's just the way I'm wired. Like, I need to understand, at least at a more than an inch deep level, why I'm doing what I'm doing. Because for me, it helps with a lot of the stuff we talked about earlier, which is like, there's going to be resistance. There's going to be internal resistance from yourself. There's going to be things that push in on you from the outside. Your results may vary a little bit. So if you don't understand what's happening, that tends to spike your anxiety. And for me, your fear, and you get wrapped around the axle, and it's kind of one of those things where I thought, and this is another reason for the second run. It's like, let's get another inch deep on this and see, and make sure you understand what's going on. And I have more interest than I have bandwidth. So I think this stuff is really interesting, but I needed to basically nail down I always talk about this, and my kids are probably sick of hearing it. It's like, what are the big rocks that I need to get into the container? And if I have time and, like I said, bandwidth or interest, I'll worry about the little rocks in the sand getting in there. But I need to know what are the big ones that I need to move the needle. And I wanted to make sure I had my arms around that stuff. And, that's kind of my motivation for doing that. I mean, it's education's been huge in my life, changed the course of my life, really, to be honest. But it's one of those things that's kind of addictive, because the more you learn, the more you find out you don't know. And so it's kind of a cycle.
Yes.
You can get addicted to it. And some people don't like that, because it's a little bit, sometimes it's painful to learn stuff because you figure out what you don't know or what you had wrong. So you have to be able to, like, deal with that. But anyway, that's why I kind of came back. And that's why I tried to dig a little bit deeper on certain things, to make sure I understood. Yeah,
for sure. And it's like a filter, right? Like you said, what did you just say? You said, I have a lot of interest, but not all the bandwidth. It's like if somebody just wanted to learn everything in the world, you'll never be able to read all the books that exist ever. Like, there's more being produced every day than you can possibly ever keep up with. So how do you get to that, especially if it's not your area of expertise? And I mean, that's why I hire coaches all over the place, business and podcasting and training. And it's like, yeah, I understand there's an investment of money, but there's a money time trade-off. And usually you get way more results from it as a result. So tell us about you talked about leading indicators. I like that. So it makes me think of KPIs, of process-oriented, like in the now things you can measure ahead of time so that on the back end you get the result. It's like in a company, right? You don't measure toward profit. Like you don't act toward profit. You act toward all the little actions day to day, customer satisfaction and delivery and things like that get you the profit. And the profit's just, going to happen. Same thing with weight loss, fat loss, whatever. You don't lose 20 pounds. You track your macros. You eat your carbs. You train, right? So tell us some of the most important indicators other than tracking food that you've already mentioned that you found in the process.
With nutrition, first I learned this like super young, so I was lucky. And I learned it through sports. One of the sports teams I was involved in was super successful. I was kind of mediocre, but the program was exceptional. And the thing that stuck with me about that program was they never talked about winning. All we did was win, but they never talked about winning. They talked about performance. And I remember, walking off the mat, winning, getting chewed out, walking off the mat after having my butt kicked, but fighting and having people hugging me and, telling me what a great job I did. So it was like, this is how you get good. You just focus on the process and what you're supposed to be doing and how you're performing. And so just like fast forwarding into nutrition, it's like, well, this is why like working with you and getting a plan together was so important. It's like, okay, here's the rate of loss. Here's where you should end up by the math at the end of the 3 months. But here are the things you need to do this week to get there. And it's like, okay, total calories, like protein intake. Really for me, I tried to focus on the few big things. It was, controlling my total caloric intake and making sure I got enough protein at the highest level. That was really were my kind of leading indicators every day and every week. And, I would get on the scale every day. And those were, now my daily scale weight was not, you talk about this a lot. It's like, that's going to fluctuate. But when you get on a scale every day and you put it into whatever app you're using, and if the app's good, it's going to give you a weight trend. So you're going to be able to see where you're going, but getting on, recording it, and then hitting your targets every day, every week for food intake. And whether you need to drink more water, we did a thing where we upped my steps. Remember in the beginning, because I sit here all day, with smoke coming out of my ears, thinking really hard, but I don't move a ton other than lifting.
That's right. That's right. That was a big change.
And when we got that up to 8,000 steps and then 10,000 steps a day, my heart rate dropped from like the high 70s to like the high 60s, like almost overnight.
That's right.
So it's like, I want to reduce my heart rate. What am I going to do? Like, am I focused on that? It's like, no, you have to get up and walk around. It wasn't even like training. It was like, just go walk.
Yeah. And actually you didn't even focus on steps. So what you're saying is one of the results is the heart rate. An intermediate result is higher step count, but even that is not the KPI. The KPI is the activity that gets you the steps.
Right. It's like, I try to like shrink it down to like, what do I need to do today? Cause I can't think about this week or so. To your point, it's like, you need to get up every so many minutes and walk, or go out for a walk, or whatever. And those are like the most immediate things that you need to do. I think what happens if you don't do that is like, okay, so we do that math at the beginning of the cycle and I should lose 17 pounds at the end of this 3 months, right? But I only lose 14. So then it's like, oh, well, I failed. I missed by 3 pounds. It's like, you're 14 pounds lighter than you were when you started, you dummy. And you're less fat and you're healthier and all that. That's a win.
A huge win. Yeah. Yeah. You weren't fixated on the number. You're fixated on the process, right. And you got a huge win.
Right. Mm-hmm. So it's like that. That's why I think that's so, everybody wants to win, whatever the win is, but you're not going to get there if you don't do the things that you need to do every day to get there. And I think you're way better off focusing on that stuff and seeing where you end up than obsessively focusing on that outcome.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but half the time when you ask the question, like, what do I do for X? The answer is either, what do you think we should do? Like,
right.
what will work for you?
Yeah.
Or why don't we look at the data and figure out what it's telling us? Because again, I think a good coach isn't just going to say, do this. A coach can do that, right? If in certain cases, it's like, no, just do this. But in a lot of cases, it's like, I got to work with you. You know you better than me.
Right.
I'm not your nutritionist, sitting there every day planning out all your meals. It's like, you got to live your life, man. So you tell me these five options for hitting this KPI and let's make it happen.
That's exactly right. I'm glad you brought that up because it's like, that's not what this service is that you provide. It's not like, here's your breakfast, here's your snack, here's your lunch. It's what kind of foods do you like to eat? You kind of get a feel for that person and then say, okay, this one's good. It's rich in protein. It's very protein dense for the calories, right? This one, not so much. Maybe you pick that up when we come out of the cut, and then, you kind of let the person put their own kind of micro package together, but you're kind of guiding people through how to do that. And that's right. I mean, whether it's getting more steps, it's like, well, do you have a dog? What do you have? How can you get more steps in? And it's like, oh yeah, I have a dog. I can walk the dog more, or do you have a treadmill? It's like, yeah, if you absolutely have to, at the end of the day, if you want to get another 1,500 steps in or 2,000, you could walk on the treadmill. It's like, oh yeah, I have a TV next to the treadmill. I could listen to a podcast or do something while I'm walking on the treadmill.
Habit stack.
So it's like, I think that's right. It's a difference between a coach and like a nutritionist or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And even the approach you take isn't always set in stone because life changes, your situations change. Sometimes my answer is just try it out. Try it out for 2 weeks. And if you don't like it, we'll try something else. Okay. So one of those things, despite all that, I will look at your data, right? And there were times where I'd look at things and see insights or opportunities. And I'm like, hey, Jerry, you could do better here, right? Like we can move up, you could eat more carbs, whatever it is. And kind of identify that, but then it's still up to us together to figure out how to do that.
Yep.
Let's just talk about carbs because you went from carnivore, which is all animal products, no carbs. I mean, it's like even lower than keto in a way, right?
Yeah.
It's like practically no carbs at all because you're just not eating anything with carbs. What was that shift like for the carbs? Were you like, yeah, heck yeah, no problem? Or was there's some difficulty there?
I don't think I was like that. I think, you were always, my carbs are always a little bit low. At least in the beginning, I think I got better at it. And I think it was just not, was the carnivore experience was kind of a manifestation of this, but I think I had really internalized this like war on carbs as like, I think Mark Bell used to call it that, it's kind of funny, but it's like, I think I had kind of internalized that and said, well, I can't eat any carbs because like I said, there's a history of type 2 diabetes and this and that and the other thing. And it was like, you don't want to overeat carbs and processed foods, and really sugar, I think is the big thing. But it's like, okay, you can have some rice or you can have fruit. Like I like fruit, and depending on what you're eating, there could be a fair amount of carbs in those. So it's like, okay, you can eat that stuff. Like, you're just going to eat it and try to make it conform to what the goals that we've set out with your macros. So that was a big one, I think, the carbs. And we did find a kind of an interesting little anomaly because my wife does kind of keto. And so I think we were trying to figure out, like, I was hitting my calories, but the way that the standard 4 calories per gram, I guess, of carbs and fat, I had found this like keto bread and it's full of fiber and it's not that many calories. So it's like, how are you like doing this? Why are your carbs not higher? What are you actually eating? And we figured out, oh, it's this stuff and there's like a ton of fiber in it. So it's like
20 grams a slice or something. Yeah.
So I was like, it tastes kind of like bread. So
I mean, it's great for a fat loss phase. It's one of those like little hacks.
It's good for fat loss. Yeah, I think that was one of the things. And also I think even the movement was a challenge, because if your job doesn't require you to get up, and actually mine requires me to sit down and focus, it's like, you're kind of battling that. So if you're not really conscious about it, you can tank on your movement, and it doesn't help when you're in a cut if you're not moving. So those kind of things, I think we had to really kind of check and adjust every once in a while. And I needed to be reminded, once in a while. So.
We all do, man. I mean, I'm in a fat loss phase right now and I'm seeing it slow down, and I know exactly why. It's because my steps are like 4,000 lower than they normally are. Okay. If you have the data, you're like, it's clear right. As right, as, what's going on. Now, during these 2 cuts, what about your biofeedback? Like things like hunger, digestion, sleep, stress, like were any of those problematic at any point or challenging in any way?
Well, beginning, there was, once I adjusted what I was eating, and started eating less kind of processed stuff that's very calorie dense, but not very satiating, and kind of nutrient deficient, to be honest. that kind of went away. There was hunger initially, but once we figured out, okay, you need to eat more chicken in a cut. You're not going to be eating steak. You're going to be eating more chicken, more fish. Greek yogurt was like, my found source of protein that was really satisfying. And so the hunger was one thing, but that eased off pretty quick. And once I kind of slowed down and just ate and then stopped, and kind of realized you're full. Like you're not hungry anymore, dude. Like you can move on to something else. Like, and also the other thing I think that I realized that I had to adjust to was I wasn't really drinking enough. That's another thing I've struggled with fluid, water. And so sometimes you're thirsty, but for some reason you think you're hungry and you're eating. So the hunger was one thing. Digestion, the other thing that I didn't mention before we started working together, I started to really experience for really the first time some acute kind of digestive stuff like reflux. I got really bad heartburn for the first time in my life, like before we started working together, kind of like mild reflux after you eat, having to clear your throat, just kind of stuff where it's like, what is going on here? Let off kind of right away when we started to cut and has stayed gone as long as I'm not drinking too much alcohol or getting off track too much. I can feel it when I do go to a social event and maybe have a few extra drinks, or I'll eat out or something. And it's like, yeah, I can definitely feel it in the digestion area. But, and I also, the other thing that we did with that was got on a probiotic and that helped a lot too. So yeah, it was the digestive symptoms and the hunger were kind of two things that, the digestive symptoms let off and the hunger did ramp up a little bit. But once I adjusted and started eating better food, better quality food, it wasn't really a huge issue for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And hunger is different for everyone, and it depends on how fast you're going and how much weight you start with. Like being a bigger guy, I always notice that bigger individuals will have maybe a little less hunger just because they have like the fat stores to draw from. It's kind of a weird phenomenon. But this whole idea so there's always this debate about intuitive eating versus tracking. And we talk about doing both together. And the fact that you have all the data and you're tracking it all develops that intuition. Right. And what you're saying is now that if you go have some drinks or do this, you feel it. A lot of people aren't even in tune with that. They just kind of are living in a certain way. They always feel that way potentially, and they don't notice the contrast, right? And you mentioned like hydration. I know, and this may not be for everyone, when I'm in fat loss, if I start to feel like my stomach is empty, like almost like not just hunger, but it's like there's a void in there, I know it's probably because I haven't drunk enough. It's not that I haven't eaten. It's because I haven't. And I go get a glass of water and like an hour later, it starts to subside. Yep. So it's just kind of being in tune with those things is super important. And yeah, probiotics, that's a whole thing with gut health that's fun to get into. All right. Just a couple more things before we sign up. Were there any other, I guess, aha moments that we didn't cover from your whole journey, whether it was mindset, sustainability, specific tools or tactics?
No, I mean, I think what you just mentioned was one. It was, I had always heard this debate between intuitive eating and more tracking. I think they kind of are complementary. Like for me, intuitive eating didn't mean anything when I didn't know how to eat. It was like, well, I'm just going to eat whatever doesn't eat me first and try not to eat too much of it, but it's like, but now I can do that because, and again, it's getting on the scale every day. That's another big one. And learning to eat the right way. It's like, now I know what right is for me and what is going to keep me at a body weight that I think is better or healthier for me. And so I know what 40 grams of oatmeal looks like now as I stare at it every morning on the scale. I know what it looks like. I know what 8 ounces of steak looks like. I know what 6 ounces of chicken looks like. And I'm probably off, but I'm not eating 18 ounces of chicken. I'm eating maybe 8 if I think it's 6. So I think that was one of the big ahas was, all this tracking now allows me to be a little more intuitive. Yeah. Opposed to you need that data and you need to learn first what's right and what it looks like. And then you can identify it out there without all the support.
Yeah. It constantly comes up because the premise people have is, when do I not track? And it's like, well, that may not even be a question. Like, you don't have to not track. You could just track at different levels or pause tracking, or like it's a whole spectrum. Nobody's telling you to do any of this stuff, but if you want data, that's how you get it, is track and measure stuff. I think it's kind of obvious, but I know I get people have emotional attachments to these things that have to be shifted. Training. I know. I wanted to ask you about your training. So like people want to know, did you all of a sudden go into a fat burning training program with high reps and lots of cardio?
No, I didn't do any cardio during either of the cuts. I mean, I tried to, for general health, like you said.
Say that again so people hear that.
Zero cardio training.
Other than walking.
Than just trying to be healthy and moving a little bit. Yeah, I didn't need it. And I don't think it would have helped. And I adjusted my like from a weight training perspective. I mean, I came from more when I learned how to lift again in my early 30s, I started in a powerlifting kind of setting. So I learned the 3 big lifts, learned how to progress on them. It was great, as a base. I think I've gradually moved more now as I've gotten older into more of a bodybuilding type training split. I love all these debates about, whole body and body part splits, and people are like at each other's throats and stuff. It's like, it's all moving weight. And, there's big
works.
There's big things that you need to have in place in your program for it to work. And then there's a lot of variability in there, a lot of elbow room. So I didn't change too much. I did go to what I did, though, the biggest change was I went to a higher frequency, kind of lower volume per session type of training program. So I went from like a 4-day, maybe upper lower split to a 6-day body part split, where the sessions are much lower volume per session, still training hard, pushing really hard on the work sets, like close to, technical failure. The reps really need to slow down on those work sets if you're not going to do as many of them. But I found that was beneficial for me. I felt better. I think I was, technically probably generating, more muscle protein synthesis maybe more often. And it worked for me. It was motivating. I could get in and out of the gym. I didn't dread, a 90-minute session in the morning. And so, but that was it. I would say that was like a tweak of the dial rather than a major shift. But that's it, really.
It's important to understand, so people understand, right? There's the principles that never change, but there are some things that can benefit you in fat loss. And I know from your program, I'm going to say 2 off the top that from what you just said. One is because you had that higher frequency and shorter sessions, there's some sort of balance across the week, knowing that you have a lower energy available to you that could work for people and feeling more recovered, even though you're working more, you're going to the gym more often, but they're shorter. And then another thing is a more auto-regulated type program. It's not a powerlifting, like you're always hitting 1RMs or PRs.
Right.
You're hitting that day's PR perhaps, but not necessarily an all-time PR every time.
Right.
So what's next for you, man? What are you doing now? What's next?
IFBB Pro card, man. No, I think
you got to talk to Eric Helms. Oh, that's natural though.
Yeah. I think I'm gonna, I really am comfortable at the weight I am now. I'm hovering around, 225, 226, 227, depending on, how much, if I have any alcohol or eat out, weight can jump 3 pounds in a day easy. And you taught me you did not gain 3 pounds fat overnight. Don't freak out. Give it a couple of days. It'll come back down. But I think I'm going to hang there until maybe later this summer. And I think I am going to do another cut in the fall, try to get down to my goal is the 2 teens, and maybe live around 220 for the time being, and maybe see if I can stay there and for a while and, just keep going. And I could see myself doing this mini cuts or cuts every so often for the next decade, keep my weight where I want it and just keep my blood work where I want it and look the way I want. So that's really it, man.
Nice, man. Yeah. It's kind of like maintenance. I mean, you got into the point where small tweaks will get you there. And that's, when we started, you just wanted to shift toward that equilibrium where you want to be. Now, maybe if you want to maximize your leverages, you get down close to 205, 210. I don't know. No, I'm joking because the height times 3 formula in our forum.
I have Tony kind of every once in a while will send me a message and say, why don't you just do a bench only competition? Like you're 50, like, well, if I get old enough and I'm the only one left, like I probably win something.
Yeah, there you go.
But no, I've toyed with that too, of trying to get back into maybe compete once in a while, but I'd like to do that at a lower body.
All right. So what question is coming? Is there a question that you wish I had asked? And what is your answer?
I had it. And I think I answered it already. I did.
We covered a lot.
Unwittingly in my urge to fill the time and say interesting things. But my question was going to be, why did you, for you to ask me why I hired you, in the first place, you specifically, not a coach. And I think.
Yeah. And you kind of answered that, but I, for my ego, if you want to add to that, no, I'm just kidding. I
think I can add to it a little bit. I think one of the things for people like me who like a hobbyist, man, this isn't my, my main thing or even my second or third thing. Is super important to me. But really, for me, it was looking for somebody that kind of understood that population. And you have a really unique skill set for working with general population. I think you could probably work with whoever you wanted to, but people who are really juggling a lot of stuff, who do this because they like it and they want to, take it to the next level without having it consume their entire life, presuming that, hey, I can, I'm going to be able to devote massive amounts of time to this. So your unique skill, I think, Philip, and I've mentioned this to you before, is you can operate at any level of depth that a client would want. And that's really, I think, a unique skill, because there's some people that are really deep, but they can't pull back. And like some weeks it's like, man, I just need to know what to do. I'm really busy. Like everybody's stressing me out. I got 10 million things. Other weeks it lets off and it's like, well, why this? Why that? Why the other thing? And you're not like frustrated by that or anything. So I think that's really, what I wanted to make sure I covered is that if you're looking for help like that, I don't know of anybody better to get it from. So
appreciate that, man. No, I appreciate that. And I mean, the general thought here is, finding a coach that can communicate with you and work with who you are and where you are in life. And yeah, it's not like any coach can work with anybody. You got to find the right for you. And you've got to be able to be friends with them in a sense, right? Because as we're working together, if the personalities bash too hard, that's going to be tough as well. So yeah, I consider you a friend and you've been awesome to work with so far. And I know we're going to continue to be in touch. We're in the lifting club and everything. And I hope everybody listening here got just tons of even just practical advice, let alone motivation and philosophical inspiration from you with everything you've done. So well done. And thanks so much for coming on. I do want to give people a chance to reach out to you though, if you wanted to tell them how to do that.
I mean, like Philip said, I have an Instagram account. It's basically like a zoo cam in my basement, just me going down there and training. There's no talking or anything like that. So if you want to get in touch with me, I think the handle is @thebasement8, and credit to Tony Perry for calling me that in the lifting club, and it kind of stuck. So you can, reach out to me there, request to follow me or whatever the thing you do on Instagram is, and I'll hit okay. And, if you want to send me a message, I'm happy to respond or share whatever I can to help you out. So
I'm not far ahead of you with Instagram knowledge. Trust me. Being we're not that far apart in age where like I didn't grow up with it, so I'm just still struggling through. But we'll throw the handle in there @thebasement8. It's been a lot of fun talking with you today, Jerry. Thanks for coming on, doing this. Have the courage to share what you've been through, and thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.